Greg Smoak.
Jon Cooper has been our go-to when it comes to the NFL draft as an analyst. He's been with us, I think, the last 5 or 6 weeks, including today, the day before the 2023 NFL draft. John, how much of this Will Levis thing do you believe as far as him jumping up the charts and whatever was out there and the odds in Vegas, et cetera? Is that just the stuff that people throw against the wall and maybe even speculation started by teams that want others to fall?
This is something new to me, to be honest with you. That S2 cognition test, is relatively new. I know the Wonderlic's been around for a while. And how much that's supposedly the driving force behind this is from what I'm hearing. Stroud's dropping down to number 4 or 5 or whatever it is. And, I go back to what, an old GM told me. He says, listen to that stuff, but only believe about a third of it. And so until it's kind of like I'm going to see it when I believe it. I wouldn't go that route. I still see some issues in terms of mechanics, but if a quarterback coach thinks this guy's really got it, the general manager and the scouts, this guy can do it, we can correct those flaws, and his inconsistencies in college don't matter because he's got the talent that we can make something out of. And he does have a lot of talent for sure. But I just find it hard to believe he'd be the first guy. But hey, could happen.
John, the popular opinion out of Houston seems to be that at least at number 2, they're not going to draft a quarterback. Does that shock you?
That does surprise me, considering the situation they're in. But again, that could be smoke too. And on the other hand, they might want to trade down and get some players because they could use some.
John, how much does, if at all, the trade of Aaron Rodgers shake things up in general for both teams involved, Packers and the Jets?
Well, it helps the Packers, I think, because they get so they move up a couple of places, and I don't know what they're looking for, but I have an idea that they would really like to get an impact offensive player, a receiver or tight end. I think tight ends, they wouldn't have a problem getting where they were, but maybe they want that receiver from Ohio State. Smith Nijma, and if that's the case, then I could, that kind of makes a little bit of sense, in terms of what they're going to get. They also picked up another second-round pick, and they've got some positional needs that they'll be able to address with those 2 picks. So I think it helps the Packers. The Jets get Rodgers. That's the bottom line. They get Rodgers, and they lose a good second-round pick. So, I don't know who the winner of that is. If Rodgers takes them to the promised land, it's a win for both.
The Tyree Wilson at Tech and then also Will Anderson from Alabama, who do you like the best?
Well, I like Will Anderson the best. I think he's the most consistent player of the 2. I mean, he's a different player. He's primarily on the edge guy, bend and squeeze to the quarterback, turns quickness into power. Wilson is more of a power player. He's got some work to do, I think, on technique. That doesn't mean he doesn't have quickness on the edge. He does. He's also got versatility to move around the defensive line. He can play a little 3 technique in passing situations as well as play on that edge. I mean, he fits a 4-3 really well as a defensive end. He's a solid player, obviously. So there's a difference. You're going to use Anderson primarily as an edge guy, period.
John, could we see maybe 6 cornerbacks go in the first round when you talk about Christian Gonzalez, Joey Porter Jr., Deontay Banks, Julius Brents? I'm leaving 2 out. Emmanuel Forbes, maybe one more?
Yeah, Joey Porter Jr.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Cam Smith even possibly. You can go all the way down to Kaylee Ringo, who he was going into this season was considered to be the best cornerback coming out. And he's still the same guy. He just didn't play as well as expected. There were some mistakes that he made. He was a little lazy, I think, in terms of letting receivers get up on his toes, and he gave up a lot more play. I should say a lot more. He gave up more plays than you think. But if you watch the TCU game at the very end there, he did a great job on Quentin Johnson. So he's an elite talent, and it wouldn't shock me if he went in the first round. It's a good year for corners. Deontay Banks. I mean, there could be 7, that have first-round grades on them.
John, what are the major differences that you see between Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs, just in breaking down the different types of players they are? And obviously those two have been kind of the talk of the running back town, but is there anybody that's close to that in your mind that we could see going relatively early?
No, not really. I think, Gibbs is a great player. He's got good speed. He does a lot of things well, but the guy we're talking about, Robinson, is what I would consider an elite running back. I mean, he's a guy that can do it all. He's got good hands. He's going to help you in the passing game. He's not just, a move the chains running back. He can hit home runs. I mean, look at his speed. Look at some of the runs he's made. And Gibbs is a speed back, I think, primarily. That doesn't mean he's not a really good running back, but I think there's a little bit of a drop off between him and Robinson.
Who is the player, John, that then fires up the rest of the first round? Because, Bryce Young, Will Anderson, whatever, and I know it might be the quarterback position, but is there a player, and could it be Bijan? Because there's thoughts he could go as high to Philly at 10, who knows, or all the way down towards the end of the first round. Who is the one guy that maybe just catapults the whole first round into chaos?
That's a great one. Bijan Robinson, if he went that high to a team that strictly looked at the talent level of the player and he wasn't necessarily best player available at a position of need, that would change things a little bit. But either way, if he goes at one of those spots, it's not going to cause a run on running backs. I think the running backs are going to go where they're going to go. I think what you're looking at is a lot of people are looking at the offensive tackle position, the edge rusher position. I think once those guys start going off the board, I think you're going to see a run. I think all of those tackles, Skoronski, Johnson, Jones, Harrison, they all, especially the first three in our mind anyway. I know Wright's getting some play right now, but they're going to go pretty close as people start to see, I need that tackle. I need that really badly. I think the Bears are a key team there because, when you get to the Bears, they need the edge rusher. They need the offensive lineman. And so they could start to run, so to speak, on either one of those two positions.
I bet you there's a ton of people in Chicago hoping for Peter Skoronski there. I mean, there's no more Chicago thing than being a tackle for Northwestern and then going to the Bears.
Well, his grandpa was a former Packer tackle, that. So that's a little bit of a problem.
Oh, yeah.
But the bottom line is, he's a great player, and I know he's got to be on the Bears' radar. And that's kind of where we see that run starting. There's kind of a mini run on the corners. We think that Witherspoon and Gonzalez are top 10 corners, and they may not both go in the top 10, but we think we could see something like 3 edge rushers going right in a row, or 3 tackles going right in a row, or both. In those maybe 9 to 14 area. Then I think you're going to see one of those receivers is going to go up pretty high. We think the edge rushers obviously are, is critical. And we have actually 7 guys that could have first round grades as edge rushers. So it's and maybe 4 or 5 tackles. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there.
John, I guess when all is said and done, we'll know tomorrow night. But Jalen Carter, I guess the incident that happened a couple months back didn't seem to have, outside of the initial reaction, too much of an effect on his draft stock, or did it? And was that just kind of one of those things that behind the scenes the teams worked at and just, were able to check off the boxes they needed to make sure that there's nothing to worry about there?
Well, he's had enough visits and he's talked to enough people both at the combine and after the combine, and I got to believe teams are pretty well sold on whether they're going to keep him on their board or not. And I think 90% of the teams would have him on their board still. So he's a talented player. He's got some maturity issues most likely that are going to have to be worked on. But there's an awful lot of guys his age that have that. So it's not like these NFL teams haven't dealt with that before. So, I don't think it's going to affect his status that much. He's not the number 1 player in the draft in our minds, but, he's going to be in the top five or six, we think.
Do you feel like that Devin A-Chain, obviously there's going to be people who look at his size. He could also do something with special teams. He's dynamic, but he is a Saturday draft pick, or do you feel like that maybe by the end of the day on Friday he will be picked?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we've got him definitely as we got him as a fairly solid third-round pick for us. So we think he's got great speed. I mean, you can't teach that. That's one thing of all the things you can teach. You can't teach that. And he's got a burst. And he can get in and out of traffic. He can do a lot of. He's a good speed back. He's a change of pace back. He's going to make a nice back for somebody. And we see him as an upper third-round pick.
Jon Cooper, Ourlad's Guide to the NFL Draft, with us on 365 Sports. The draft, of course, the first round is tomorrow in Kansas City.
John, what do you think that the Seahawks will do with 5 and 20?
We think that Jalen Carter will be their pick at 5, simply because it's a need. He's too good to pass up. And I don't think there's another player, unless Will Anderson has fallen down there, that they would consider there. That's just our opinion. That's how we see it. And then down there at 20, they could use some big people. So one of those offensive tackles, could go there. They need a guard. Osiris Torrance, could be a pick. That's who, our mock draft that was done in March. We only do one. We don't love to do them, but that's what the computer spit it out for us. So, but there's some solid, football players that are going to be available there, whether they want to go with somebody, on the edge at that point, an offensive lineman, depends on what they think is the best player available in a position of need.
John, I'm sorry. Go ahead. No, I saw something that Quentin Johnston at TCU, is a local high school player here from Temple, had a great year, but that he was the biggest risk-reward wide receiver in the first day or second day. Do you believe that?
No, I think he's going to be a really solid player. I looked at all the stats and I looked at all the things that people are writing about him. They're looking at an 11% drop rate, which isn't obscene. It's not great, but an awful lot of times targeted he was. So, he's a very productive receiver. He's got great length. He's got speed, and he runs good routes. The hands thing, there's some, I guess you'd say, high-profile drops that he's had. And they talk about him being a body catcher. Well, sometimes he's that tall, the ball gets to him, about nose level, and you're that tall, you're going to catch the ball a little closer to your body than you should. But I don't necessarily say he's a body catcher, is one of the criticisms that I hear from the pundits. And I've watched him. I like him. I think he's got some correctable flaws as far as receiver is concerned. From everything I've heard, he's a hard worker, and he's the kind of guy that is going to develop into a good receiver. I don't see him as a risk pick, at all. But again, my opinion is one opinion among many. So you just don't know until you get him in your room and start throwing balls to him.
I know that Bijan gets a lot of the attention because he's pretty much the number one running back, Gibbs, who Paul brought up at Alabama. But I like and always have liked the style of Roschon Johnson in the NFL, maybe even more so than college. Now, I don't know about his pure raw speed, but he's a banger. He's a physical player. And could he be one of those where somebody that's going to have running back by committee would be interested in him maybe earlier than we think?
That's a possibility. We don't see him going, terribly high, but, he's a power runner, and, you need that guy. I mean, the team that comes to mind for me is the Ravens with, the kid from Ohio State and Gus Edwards, Gus the Buff. That's a good combination of inside and outside, hard runner that isn't, completely, devoid of ability to get out there around the edge and turn the corner. And I think, Johnson's shot is similar to that. He's a guy that he's not terrible. He's not slow, but he's not a burner. He's not necessarily a agility and traffic guy. I mean, I think the 40 they had on him was in the 4.5, so he's not the burner, but he's a former quarterback, so he's got some agility. and he's a power back, and he's got a little bit of a burst to get around the corner. So he's not a bad player.
I had one more question from the chat room about Case Keenum signing with the Texans. Obviously, Davis Mills right now is their quarterback. There's a really good chance it might end up being maybe C.J. Stroud, Levis, or Bryce Young, whatever happens there. Was he hired? Was he signed to be more of a coach for whoever they get? Or was he, and he can obviously be a workman-like veteran, a great guy to have on the depth chart, but will he be more of a coach, you think, for them?
Well, the thing, it's a new deal this year. You got to have 3 quarterbacks dressed for every game. So everybody's going to have a quarterback, a third quarterback. And you don't want a guy that's just a practice squad player to be that third guy. So, and Case Keenum's really smart. So you could say that about him. He's got a great football IQ. He's been around for a while. I mean, he's not the most gifted quarterback in the world, but he is a smart football player. And yes, having a guy like that in your quarterback room is definitely going to help. Whoever they have it as a starting quarterback, whether it's Mills, fairly young guy, or whether they draft somebody, you're gonna have a quality player to go along with him.
Jon, we can't thank you enough for all the knowledge you've dropped on us and with us and for our audience the last month and a half. We appreciate you. Hope Dan's doing better and better with Ourlad's guy, Dan Shonka, who I've known for 2 decades. We appreciate your time.
Well, thank you for having me.
You're really good at what you do. Jon Cooper, Ourlad Scouting Service, and Dan Shonka we've had on so many times.